Thanks for joining, everybody. We'll get started in just a moment.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get started. This is the CCB second live educational webinar regarding consumption lounges. Today's date is September 30th, 2022, and this webinar will last approximately 90 minutes. So joining from the CCB are myself, Tiana Bonner, the Public Information Officer, Sarah Tajali, the Education Information Officer, Michael Miles, Deputy Director, Steve Gilbert, Chief of Administration, Glenroy Cole, Program Manager, who's overseeing the Consumption Lounge program, and Sydney Booker, who's part of our Consumption Lounge team. So the first half will be dedicated to presentations on various topics by CCB staff. The second half will be an open question and answer period. We'll go over some housekeeping notes and guidelines prior to beginning that portion. Additionally, you may enter your questions into the Q&A at any time during this webinar. Sydney is monitoring that chat and he'll flag your questions for us to circle back to at the end. So all of the information covered in our presentation is available on the CCB's Consumption Lounge page, which we have also linked in the Q&A. Additionally, frequently asked questions from this webinar and the answers to those questions will be compiled and posted on the CCB's website. You can access this information at ccb.nv.gov, then click on the Nevada Cannabis Program page and select Consumption Lounges. This webinar is being live streamed on the CCB's YouTube page. Once it's over, it'll be available to review at any time on that same page as well. And finally, I want to note that these webinars are for informational purposes only and don't constitute legal advice or represent the CCB's position or policy on any specific set of facts or circumstances. Applicants are encouraged to seek legal counsel to ensure their applications comply with all applicable instructions, statutes, and regulations, and how those specific statutes and regulations may apply to a specific set of facts or circumstances. So the purpose of this webinar is to assist potential applicants in understanding the application process and successfully submitting an application for a consumption lounge. So during the presentations, we do encourage you to take notes. We'll start with information on the application window and ways that you can pay the associated processing fees. Then we'll discuss how to prepare to apply for a consumption lounge license, the social equity program and its eligibility requirements. And then we'll go over the diversity plan, which is a requirement for all applicant types. And finally, we'll do a brief walkthrough of the application itself. So links to corresponding worksheets and other online tools and resources that are available on our website have also been added to the Q&A, and I'll pass it over to Sarah whenever she's ready.
Sorry about that, everyone. I was muted. All right. Thanks, Tiana. So just to recap what Tiana had mentioned earlier, in today's presentation, we will cover the consumption lounge application window, the processing fees associated with the application, materials and information you should gather as you prepare to apply, including applying for a Nevada State business license and a consumption lounge agent card, and what goes into a diversity plan. And finally, we'll walk through what the consumption lounge application will look like. Okay. On September 14th, the CCB released its notice of intent to accept applications for the cannabis consumption lounges. The application period will open on Friday, October 14th at 8 a.m. Pacific time and close on Thursday, October 27th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. The application is housed in a cella, which you can access on the CCB website in the upper right-hand corner under the industry login tab, as well as at the URL that you see on the screen. To successfully submit your consumption lounge application, payment of the processing fee will be required. The CCB will accept ACH payment, cashier's checks, or money order. The processing fees are $100,000 for retail lounges, $10,000 for independent non-social equity, and $2,500 for independent social equity. Remember that processing fees are non-refundable. Failure to pay your processing fee by the deadline will result in your application being rejected. Electronic ACH payments are made online through the consumption lounge application. A seller will redirect the applicant to CyberSource where they will complete their ACH transaction, and a payment authorization will be sent to them via email. Payment must be completed no later than 5 p.m. Pacific time on the final date of the open application period. If you're paying via ACH, have your banking information available, including your bank account number and routing number. To pay by cashier's check or money order, you will need to present the payment in person at the CCB office in Las Vegas or Carson City, no later than 5 p.m. on the day of the application deadline. The payment must clear for your application to move forward. Payment via mail or any other form of commercial delivery service, such as FedEx, UPS, or DHL, will not be accepted. Cash, personal checks, or business checks will not be accepted as payment. Remember, all payments must be made either online or in person, and payment via commercial delivery service will not be accepted. Again, as a reminder, payment in any form failing to clear will result in an incomplete application. All right, so now we're going to move on to how to prepare to apply for a cannabis consumption lounge, including registering for a Nevada business license, checking with your local jurisdictions, applying for agent cards, obtaining information from all owners, officers, and board members, and reviewing the social equity applicant criteria. The first step in preparing for a cannabis consumption lounge is applying for a Nevada State business license. Per NRS 678B, all applicants must provide the legal name of the proposed cannabis consumption lounge filed with the Nevada Secretary of State's office when applying for their agent cards as well. Prior to filling out your application, you must file articles of incorporation or other formation documents with the Nevada Secretary of State's office. To register your business entity and receive guidance on how to form your business, you can visit nvsilverflume.gov, or you can visit the Nevada Secretary of State's website at nvsos.gov. If you need assistance in applying for your license, the Lieutenant Governor's Office houses the Office of Small Business Advocacy that can help you with the process. And then to learn more about the Office of Small Business Advocacy, you can visit their website at ltgov.nv.gov/OSBA/home. Please note the legal name of the proposed cannabis consumption lounge on your application must match as it appears on the Nevada Secretary of State's with the Nevada Secretary of State's office. And all the links on this slide are available on the preparing to apply materials and on our website. Okay. When preparing to apply, you should also research local ordinances regarding cannabis establishments in the jurisdiction in which you wish to apply, as local jurisdictions may limit or prohibit cannabis consumption lounges. At the time of application, you will not need a specific street address, but you will need to identify the local jurisdiction in which you're applying for. The jurisdiction you choose cannot be changed once your application is submitted. Okay. The next step in preparing for the application period is ensuring that each owner, officer, and board member of the proposed business submits an application for a cannabis consumption lounge agent card and submits their fingerprints. Each cannabis establishment type has their own agent card type. You cannot use your agent card number for any other establishment type, so all owners, officers, and board members must submit an application for a cannabis consumption lounge agent card. When filling out the application, you'll be required to input when filling out the application for the cannabis consumption lounge, you'll be required to input each owner, officer, and board member's agent card record number. This means that the agent card applications must be done before you apply for a cannabis consumption lounge to generate the agent card record number. When applying for an agent card, the applicant must provide the personal and demographic information, including their name, date of birth, percentage of ownership in the business, citizenship status, and other identifying information. A full list can be found on the Preparing to Apply worksheet. In addition to the identifying information previously discussed, applicants must also verify that they are at least 21 years old, have not been convicted of a felony offense as defined in NRS 678B.050 and are compliant with court orders for child support. They must also provide the number for any agent card they already possess and cannot have had an agent registration card revoked. Additionally, they must pledge not to dispense or divert cannabis to any person not authorized to possess cannabis. More information on this can be found on the Preparing to Apply worksheet as well. Okay. The agent card application also requires a color photo of the person's government ID and a passport quality photo. For the passport quality photo, the photo should be a clear photo of the face with no obstructions, in good lighting, and against a plain white background. No headwear can be worn, including anything that obstructs the hairline, with the exception of religious head coverings. We have created guidance on cannabis agent registration card photo requirements, which you can find on the CCB website and linked in our YouTube videos as well. To apply for agent cards, you'll access the Acela Cannabis customer portal using the URL on the screen, or you can find a direct link at ccb.nv.gov under the industry login button in the top right corner of the website. We've also included the link in the Q&A under the answered questions in the Zoom. And it'll also be in the video description once this video is posted. After you've created an account and logged in, you'll follow the step-by-step instructions for agent cards. Once you've registered, there will be a confirmation page with your registration record number. We recommend printing that page, and you'll also receive a confirmation email with your record number and link with instructions on how to fulfill the fingerprint requirements. Agent card applicants are required to have their fingerprints taken by an authorized fingerprint agency. In your agent card application confirmation email, you'll receive all the instructions on how to fulfill that requirement. And an important note is that for cannabis consumption lounge applications, for the cannabis consumption lounge agent card application, payment for agent cards will not be required unless your cannabis consumption lounge application is selected for a prospective license. However, you must submit and pay for your fingerprints as instructed by the form in the agent card confirmation email in order to complete your agent card application. The CCB offers a more in-depth workshop on how to apply for an agent card on the consumption lounge page on our website. Okay. During the application process, you will need to input identifying information for all proposed owners, officers, and board members, including all owners, officers, and board members of any intermediary company in the ownership structure. A tracking tool to assist in organizing this information, which is the image you'll see on the slide, is part of the preparing to apply worksheet. For each owner, officer, and board member, you will need their name, including first, middle, and last name. If they do not have a middle name, you may enter NMN, which stands for no middle name. You also need the address on their government-issued ID. The address should match the address on the government-issued ID they uploaded into their agent card application. You'll need the full address, including city, state, and zip code. Next, you'll need their date of birth and the last 4 digits of their social security number. If they do not have a social security number, you'll enter the last 4 digits of their tax ID number. For each owner, officer, and board member, you'll also need their consumption lounge agent card application record number. A person can hold multiple types of agent cards, so be sure that you're using the consumption lounge number. Next, you'll indicate what role the person plays in your business. You have the option to check if they are an owner, officer, and/or board member. Be sure to check all that apply. You'll also be asked to indicate whether the person has ownership in another cannabis establishment in Nevada. If they do, they must provide you with the Cannabis Establishment or CEID number. If any application has an owner who owns 5% or greater interest in any entity within the ownership organization chart, and that owner is also on any other application listed as an owner who owns 5% or greater interest in any entity within the ownership structure, all such applications will be removed from consideration. Finally, you will need to indicate if the person qualifies as a social equity applicant, which we'll review in the following slides. So before we go into detail, I'll just give you an overview of what qualifies as a social equity candidate. First, an applicant or group of applicants which meet the social equity qualifications must have at least 51% ownership in the business. Second, they must have resided in a disproportionately impacted area or DIA for the last 5 years. And finally, they must have had a cannabis-related offense. If you do not have a cannabis-related offense, you may also qualify as a social equity applicant if a close family member lives or has lived in a DIA for at least 5 years and has a prior cannabis-related offense. When filling out the application for Independent Social Equity Lounge, you'll be asked whether or not, for Independent Lounge, you'll be asked whether or not you qualify as a social equity applicant. If you select yes, you'll be asked to attest that you qualify as an applicant based on the criteria we will discuss. You must meet all ownership, DIA residency, and cannabis conviction requirements to be considered a social equity applicant. During the application process, you will have to enter all the owners of your business into your initial application, their ownership percentage, and indicate whether or not each owner is a social equity applicant. You will not have to submit proof during the application process, but you should start gathering evidence in the event your application is selected. So the first factor that determines social equity eligibility is ownership. The applicant must be the majority stakeholder in the independent cannabis consumption lounge. This is strictly limited to ownership and does not include those who hold board member or officer status without any ownership. If multiple owners in a business qualify as social equity applicants, they can combine their percentage of ownership to equal or exceed 51%. Next, applicants must have lived in a disproportionately impacted area, or DIA, for the last 5 years. To be considered a DIA, the area must have a qualifying score in 2 categories. First, a DIA is an area where a census tract or tracts that, as of the 2010 census, have an incarceration rate of 3.3% or higher, which would put the tract in the 90th percentile higher when compared to the rest of the country. Second, the address or addresses must also have an area deprivation index score of 7 or higher on a state decile scale. To determine if your address or addresses meet the DIA criteria, you will utilize 2 tools. First, the Opportunity Atlas is used to determine the incarceration rate of an area. The Opportunity Atlas incorporates data from the United States Census, federal income tax returns, and the American Community Survey to measure a person's social mobility based on the neighborhood where they grew up. And you can access this tool at opportunityatlas.org. Next, the Neighborhood Atlas is used to find an area's area deprivation index score. This tool uses the American Community Survey to determine an area's socioeconomic disadvantage. And you can visit the Neighborhood Atlas at neighborhoodatlas.medicine.wisc.edu. I won't be going over the tools in today's workshop, but we have multiple resources that walk you through how to use these websites to find your scores. First, the Social Equity Eligibility webinar, which is on YouTube, and the Consumption Lounge page, and the Social Equity Methodology page, which is on the Social Equity page on the CCB website. Okay. The CCB has also created a social equity worksheet that's designed to assist you in determining your eligibility as a social equity applicant. The worksheet also provides examples of the type of documents you'll need to provide if you're selected, and a tracking tool to help keep track of your DIA scores. And that was linked in the Q&A at the beginning of the session and also on our website. If you're selected for a prospective license, you'll need to provide a piece of evidence for each year that you resided in a DIA, but you will not be required to upload supporting documentation during the application process. Examples of evidence could include a receipt for rent or a lease, a record from a public utility, a stub from an employment check, a tax record, or a notarized statement from an owner stating that the applicant lived at the residence located in a DIA. This is not an exhaustive list. We've included more examples of evidence you can provide on the Social Equity Eligibility Worksheet and in the regulations. And the final qualification for social equity is the applicant must have been convicted of a nonviolent felony and/or misdemeanor cannabis offense. Please be advised that if an applicant has 2 or more felonies or a Category A felony as defined by Nevada Revised Statute 678B.050, they are ineligible to apply. To learn more about these excluded felonies, visit the Laws and Regulations page on the CCB website. If an applicant does not have a conviction, they may also qualify for social equity status if a close family member, which includes a parent, sibling, or child, was convicted of a felony cannabis offense and they live or have lived in a DIA. If your application is selected for a prospective license, you must provide proof of your or your family member's conviction. This proof should be in the form of a certified copy of the judgment of conviction and/or a preceding sheet and/or court minutes. I want to remind everyone again that we have a video and worksheets on our website that are solely dedicated to social equity eligibility that go more in depth into the criteria and give instructions on how to use the tools that we use to determine if a neighborhood is a disproportionately impacted area. Okay. And now that we've covered preparing to apply, I'm going to pass it back to Tiana, who will cover the diversity plan and components of the application.
Thank you, Sarah. So for your diversity plan, first, it's important to note that a diversity plan is required by all applicants regardless of lounge license type. So applicants for both retail and independent consumption lounges must upload and submit this plan with their application. In order to meet the minimum scoring guidelines, the applicant must affirm that they have and will implement a diversity plan. This attestation will be accomplished by checking a box, which will be part of the attestations included in the initial application. So per NRS 678B.324, diversity refers to race, ethnicity, or gender, and the inclusion of other persons of backgrounds which are disproportionately underrepresented. However, the CCB is also encouraging the inclusion of other underrepresented groups, including veterans, persons with disabilities, and LGBTQ+. So broadly speaking, this plan should include objectives, timetables, actionable steps, and evaluation metrics. So as specified in the regulations, the diversity plan should include the following: demographic information of each owner, officer, board member, employees, and independent contractor, strategies for obtaining a diverse group of owners, officers, board members, and employees, diversity goals for employee hiring and retention, a plan for diversity related outreach or events that the applicant will conduct to support its diversity goals, any materials reflecting the applicant's mentoring, training, or professional development programs for diverse groups, and proposed timelines and benchmarks for achieving the goals outlined in this plan. So in your diversity plan, you should include the demographic information of each owner, officer, board member, employees, and independent contractor who have chosen to respond to your inquiry. Please provide this information based on your current staffing or your proposed staffing. You'll want to include the following information, but should make any response optional. So you'll want to include their gender identity and also racial or ethnic identity. Any other represented group, including but not limited to LGBTQ+, disability status, and or veteran status. And in addition to making responses optional, you may also want to offer a prefer not to answer option for all your demographic questions when collecting this information. So next, you'll want to include your strategies for recruitment of a diverse workforce. This can include plans for hiring and retention or outreach events. To answer this portion of the diversity plan, you can ask yourself the following questions. What type of outreach do you plan to do to recruit a larger and more diverse pool of applicants? What resources, training, or professional development programs are you willing to offer? And how will you demonstrate your commitment to diversity to current and potential employees? Next, you'll want to outline your short and long-term goals for recruitment and retention of a diverse staff and how you envision reaching those goals. Additionally, applicants are encouraged to submit any other information that demonstrates their commitment to diversity. Once plans are received, the board will determine whether the stated goals outlined in each diversity plan are reasonable and represent a good faith effort. The board will review the diversity plan as part of the suitability determination for licensure. We also want to mention here that once an applicant's conditional license has been issued, the diversity plan which they submit will no longer be confidential. This is in our regulations and based on feedback that we received during our workshops. However, the names and any other personally identifying information included in a diversity plan will remain confidential pursuant to NCCR 6.035. And so for more guidance on diversity plans, the CCB has created a worksheet, which is on the Consumption Lounge page. And next, we'll be moving on to a brief walkthrough of the application. So to access the Cannabis Consumption Lounge application, you'll first visit Acela. The easiest way to access the site is to visit our CCB website. Click on the industry login in the upper right-hand corner and then select Acela from the drop-down. Before we get into the application, we'd like to provide a disclaimer that some aspects of the application, including the verbiage that you're going to see today, are subject to change. This overview will focus on the steps of the application. We will not be reading through the attestations or the instructional text in the application. So once you reach the Acela website, you'll log into your account. You should have created an Acela account when you applied for your agent card already. Once you log in, you'll click on Cannabis, and then you'll click on Create an Application. You'll see information pop up, including a general disclaimer, And once you're done reading everything, check the box to acknowledge that you've read the terms and click continue. On the next page, you'll click the triangle icon next to adult use license applications to reveal a drop-down menu, and then you'll select consumption lounge application and click continue. And in the application intake section, you'll be given some general information to review, and then you'll provide information on the applicant, business entity, lounge license type, local jurisdiction, and the certification statement. So in the applicant portion, you should include the name, email, and mailing address of the applicant. You can add your information or select from an account that may already be saved in Acela, and each option will bring up a pop-up to input and review your information. Once you've entered your information, the applicant box will include the applicant's information, and you'll see that green check mark, and it'll say, added successfully, and that's how you know that it's been done correctly. Next, you'll enter the business entity. In this part of the application, you'll provide the same name of the business that's on your agent card and is registered with the Nevada Secretary of State's office. So like the applicant portion, you'll see your information populate in the box, and then that green check mark, which lets you know that you've done it successfully. And then next, you'll select the local jurisdiction for the proposed cannabis consumption lounge. Check all of the acknowledgement boxes and select your jurisdiction. For some jurisdictions, another drop-down menu will appear to select a more specific location within that jurisdiction. As a reminder, you'll be locked into the jurisdiction which you select, so please verify with your local jurisdiction that consumption lounges will be allowed before you get to this step. Next, you'll select the type of lounge you'll be applying for. For retail lounges, you'll be asked to add your cannabis establishment ID number. And if you're applying for an independent lounge, you'll be asked whether or not you're applying as a social equity applicant. If you're a social equity applicant, the attestations will appear that must be answered before you can proceed with the application. And finally, on this page, you'll fill out your certification statement. This box will appear at the end of the first few steps of the application. And so at this point, you'll notice the application looks slightly different depending on the type of lounge that you're applying for. What we're showing you is the path for an independent, non-social equity lounge applicant. Be sure to read your set of attestations carefully before proceeding, because they are different for the retail lounge applications and for the social equity applicants who are applying for an independent lounge. Read through the attestations relating to the assets and location of your lounge. All of the information in these attestations can be found in the regulations regarding cannabis establishments and lounges. Visit the laws and regulations page on our website to review the regulations there. The next step is ownership information. And first, you'll answer a set of attestations regarding ownership. Next, you'll add information for all owners, officers, and board members to the chart. All of the information that needs to be included are on the owners, officers, and board members chart, which we included in the preparing to apply worksheet. So that would be something good to have on hand and filled out before starting this application. To add a person, you would just click add a row. And once you click add a row, you'll see this pop up and you'll enter all of the information for the owner, officer, or board member. You'll need to repeat this step for each owner, officer, or board member in your organization. Step 4 is to certify and indemnify this information that you've provided thus far. And in step 5, you'll be adding your diversity plan. All applicants are required to submit a diversity plan regardless of application type, just as a reminder. And when you're ready to upload your diversity plan, you would just click add. And then you'll see a pop-up appear and you'll click add to select your file. Once it's uploaded, you can click continue. And after you've uploaded your diversity plan, you'll see a screen where you're able to add additional documents or a description for your document. And when you're done with all of that, you'll click save and then continue on to step 6. In step 6, you'll be able to review all of the information in your application and make any edits. It's very important that you enter all information correctly, ensuring that all items, including email addresses and mailing addresses, are spelled correctly, because none of the information that you enter can be changed by anyone once the application is submitted. Once you're done reviewing, you can click the box to certify and electronically sign your application. And then step 7 is how you will pay for your processing fees. First, we'll cover how to pay this fee in person and then how to pay electronically. So if you're going to pay in person and therefore you'd likely pay later, you select the Pay Later button. However, again, please note that the payment must be made by 5 p.m. on October 27th, which is when the application period closes. If you're paying in person, please bring only a cashier's check or money order. Those are the only 2 things accepted. Your payment must be made in person at the Las Vegas or Carson City CCB office before the close of the application date. When you select Pay Later, a pop-up will appear with warnings on the payment. If you do not pay your processing fee before the end of the application window, your payment will not be accepted and your application will be deemed incomplete and it will be removed from consideration. So once you've acknowledged the warning, you'll be taken back to the submission page and you'll see a $0 processing fee. However, please note that this full fee is still due in person. You would then click Submit Application and you'd be completed with that step. If you would like to pay via ACH, so instead of selecting Pay Later, you would just click Submit Application. You'll be redirected to another page where you can add your bank account information. And to complete your ACH payment, you should just have the following information on hand: your account type, checking or savings, your driver's license number, routing number, check number, account number, and account holder information such as your name, address, phone, and email. And after submitting your application, you'll be directed to a confirmation page. On this page, you'll find your application record number near the bottom of the screen, and please retain this number for your records. You should also receive a confirmation email within 30 minutes of submitting your application. It'll have instructions on how to submit payment if you've not already done so. Your application record number will also be found in the subject of this email. And so that ends our presentation portion of this webinar. We're now going to move into the question and answer portion. Please note that out of respect for everyone's time, we will still plan to end around 1:30 today. First, Sydney will be reading through some of the questions that were submitted via registration, and then we'll move on to questions that were submitted in the Q&As and live questions that you can ask. If you have a question, please click on the raise hand icon if you're using the Zoom app. If you're joining by phone, press *9 to raise your hand. And once a moderator allows you to talk, you'll be prompted to unmute yourself. Please remember that this is a public forum and the CCB will not engage in back and forth with anyone, nor can we address specific circumstances or hypotheticals. If we're not able to get to your question during this time, please be sure to type your question in the chat so that we can address it and include it in our FAQs online. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sydney to read some of the questions that we've received so far.
Thanks, Tiana. Yes, the first question I have here is, please provide more details or explanation of qualification on individual ownership, freestanding, of the consumption lounge.
Okay, I'll take that one. An independent cannabis consumption lounge is not attached or immediately adjacent to an adult cannabis sales facility, according to NRS 678A.157. The independent cannabis consumption lounge applicant can be a social equity applicant or not. The processing fee for this license is $10,000. The processing fee is $2,500 for social equity applicants. You will be required to submit an application and payment within the open application period for consumption lounge licenses.
Great. Next question we have is, will we need a previous cannabis license, such as a dispensary license or distribution license, to acquire a cannabis consumption lounge license?
Good afternoon. This is Steve Gilbert. Thanks for the question. So if you have a licensed adult use cannabis retail store, you can apply for a cannabis consumption lounge, a retail attached cannabis consumption lounge. So you must have a retail store license to apply for a retail cannabis consumption lounge license. If you don't have a retail or any type of adult use establishment license, you may apply for an independent consumption lounge license.
Thanks, Steve. Another question we have is, what is the definition of the social equity applicants? Would being a woman-owned business qualify as a social equity applicant? And similarly, we are Black woman-owned. Does this qualify us for a social equity independent lounge license?
So this is Glenroy Cole again. As outlined in NCTR 5.055, a social equity applicant is defined by meeting all of the following criteria. 1, have at least 51% ownership in the business. 2, have resided in one of the following census tracts nationwide for no less than the previous 5 years, meeting the following 2 criteria. A census tract with a area deprivation index score of 7, state-only decile or higher, and B, a census tract that has a minimum incarceration rate in the 90th percentile, or roughly 3.3% or higher, of anyone who grew up in the census tract was in jail or incarcerated at the time of the 2010 decennial census. 3, convicted of a nonviolent felony or and misdemeanor cannabis offense, or their immediate family member, that being a parent, sibling, or child, was convicted of a felony cannabis offense and who lives in a currently lives in a census tract designated by the board as described below. A census tract with a area deprivation index score of 7, state-only decile or higher, and B, a census tract that has a minimum incarceration rate in 9th percentile, or roughly 3.3% or higher, of everyone who grew up in the census tract that was in jail or incarcerated at the time of the 2010 decennial census. Please note that those convicted of an excluded felony offense as defined in NRS 678B.050 would not be eligible for license.
Thanks, Glenroy. Another question we have is, will there be assistance on the payment for licensing for small companies?
This is Michael Miles. There is assistance for payment of licensing fees for independent cannabis consumption lounges. The procedure is found in NCCR 5.065. It will allow you to apply to the board for a decrease in your initial issuance fee or your renewal licensing fees. But you just have to follow the procedure in NCCR 5.065.
Thanks, Mike. We have another question here. How do we apply for an agent card to work in a dispensary?
So to apply for a agent card for a dispensary or any other cannabis establishment type, you can go to the CCB website, which is ccb.nv.gov. And on that homepage, you'll see a link that'll take you to the application for an agent card. And inside that link, there's instructional information as well as a link to the actual application.
Great. I have another question here. Is one requirement for a social equity applicant to be a cannabis-related offense? The wording can also be interpreted as and/or a nonviolent felony that may not be related to a cannabis offense. Please clarify.
This is Glenroy Cole again. The criterion is that the person claiming social equity eligibility must have been convicted of a nonviolent felony cannabis offense or nonviolent misdemeanor cannabis offense, or their immediate family member, that being a parent, sibling, or child, was convicted of a felony cannabis offense and lived in or currently lives in a DIA, which is a disproportionately impacted area.
Yes. And I have another question here. Is the tax structure going to be the same as retail stores?
So the short answer of that is yes. And the taxation of cannabis can be found in NRS 372A. And this specifically is in 372A.290. And it says an excise tax is imposed on each retail sale and of cannabis in an adult use cannabis retail store or cannabis consumption lounge at the rate of 10%. And again, that can be found in NRS 372A.290.
Indeed. I have another question here. How many licenses will be given total? Is it 10 each group?
Well, each adult use cannabis retail store, as long as they're operational prior to the consumption lounge gaining its final license, they can apply for a retail attached cannabis consumption lounge. That's just the ones that are that already have adult use cannabis retail store licenses. Where the other limitations are, there's going to be 10 independent cannabis consumption lounge licenses and 10 social equity. These are also independent cannabis consumption lounge licenses.
One more question here. Do the required fingerprints for all owners, officers, board members applying for consumption lounge agent card need to be received before October 14th, 2022 at 8 a.m., meaning the start of the application window, or before October 27th, 2022 at 5 p.m., meaning before the application window closes?
The fingerprints must be received by October 27th, 2022 at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And that's the close of the application window.
And this is Steve. I'll just add to that we opened up the application period for, or the agent card application ability 30 days in advance, just to give the applicants time to get their application submitted and their fingerprints done. So this 30 days, just an extra window to help applicants apply for the agent cards and get all the information submitted on time. So that's just in addition to the deadline of the 27th.
Right, thank you. We have a couple people that have their hand raised. So I'm gonna call on them and then we'll get to the Q&A that's in the chat. So the first person I have is Lance Robertson. Lance, if you could unmute, you can go ahead and ask your question. Okay, we'll get back to him. The next person we have is Chris Anderson.
Hi, I'd like to ask a couple time-sensitive questions for retail lounge applicants, if I could be so bold. The first one is whether agent card and application requirements apply to passive owners with less than 5% ownership interest.
I'll take that one. This is Steve Gilbert. So yes, it does apply to all owners, officers, and board members, because is the requirement within the statute that every owner, officer, and board member do submit a fingerprint as part of the application. So yes, it includes all owners, officers, and board members.
Okay, now we can move on to the Q&A in the chat. If you'd like to ask a question live, you can click the raise hand icon if you're using the Zoom app, or if you're joining by phone, you can press *9. If you are joining by phone, I'll call the last 4 digits of your phone number to identify you. So the first question we have in the Q&A is, what is the definition of a DIA, and are there zip code boundaries? And I can go ahead and answer this. So we define a DIA as having incarceration rate of 3.3% or higher, or if the area is in the 90th percentile. And the second qualification is it also has to have a state decile score of 7 or higher. These areas are not zip codes, but they're census tracts, so they're more specific, and you can encapsulate more in those smaller groups. So to get that DIA information, you can go to the social equity materials that we have online. In the videos, there is a walkthrough on how to get those scores for both DIA areas and how to go through both of those tools that we mentioned earlier today. Okay. The next question is, does an owner with less than 5% ownership need to apply for a consumption lounge agent card and be fingerprinted?
Yes, they do. All owners, officers, and board members must go through the application for an agent card and submit their fingerprints.
Okay, for the DIA, is it any 5-year period during a person's life, or is it the last 5 years? I'll go ahead and answer that as well. It is the last 5 years. If you're using a family member to qualify, then that 5-year period could be at any point in a person's life. Okay. For a retail adjacent store, does the applicant need to be the exact entity that holds the retail store license, or can it be a separate entity that has the same ownership? Steve, I think you're muted.
Yep, you're right. So it does have to be the entity that the state has licensed the retail store license to, has to have the exact same ownership and be the same entity that applies for the retail consumption lounge.
The next question is, does a retail applicant need to have an additional agent card for the lounge application?
Yes, and as mentioned in the PowerPoint earlier, through the agent card process for the consumption on application, the payment of the agent card application is not required until the prospective license is issued to the individual and the entity. A agent card is required for a consumption lounge employee, officer, board member, volunteer, contractor, just like any other cannabis establishment in the state.
Okay. If a sales facility licensee is allowed to create and apply under a new consumption lounge entity, could the new entity have differences in passive ownership under 5% interest?
Sarah, can you repeat that question, please?
Sure. If a sales facility licensee is allowed to create and apply under a new consumption lounge entity, could the new entity have differences in passive ownership under 5% interest?
I would feel comfortable looking at that scenario before answering it. I'd have to analyze that and look at that. I'm not clear on the question unless Mike or Glenn, you are. I'd like to look at that and then provide an answer online.
That sounds good. Yeah, we can put it up on the frequently asked questions after review it a little bit more.
Okay, I have another live question from TJ Hovind. Go ahead, TJ.
Hello, can you hear me on your end?
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
Yes.
Okay, this is Dimitri Karetis with The Grove. How are you all today?
Good.
I know this question's been asked a few times, and I just would like to get some real clarity on this. I emailed the CCB in regards to the agent cards and fingerprint requirements for the consumption lounge license, and I was, in their response, it was a 5% or more ownership. Now I'm hearing today that it's all owners and officers and board members, no matter what the ownership percentage is. Are we sure on that answer? Because I have in writing it's 5% or more. So I want to make sure everybody on this call, on this webinar, is all on the same page, because I'm hearing the question go back and forth.
Yeah, I think Steve will answer, but yes, every owner has to have an agent card. The less than 5% for consumption lounges just involves that you can be on multiple applications or have other ownership in other establishments. That's it.
And I'll just add to that also, part of that is less than 5% owners in any establishment type, including consumption lounges, have the ability to submit a waiver to the board for approval of less than 5% of not needing to get an agent card. So if a prospective license is issued to the establishment or the owner, officer, or board member, they do have the ability after that to apply to the board for a waiver, so they don't have to get an agent card if they're less than 5%. However, part of the requirements for the consumption lounge application is that every owner, officer, and board member must submit fingerprints to the board for review. Which is,
And I'd like to stress one more time, is to make sure everybody reviews anything that's up on the frequently asked questions site on the CCB website. That is where the most accurate information is going to be listed.
Okay, our next question in the chat is, if applying as independent, do we have to pay the 10K application prior to being awarded the license?
Yes, that is it's specifically called the administration processing fee. And yes, it must be paid once you submit your application.
Once the application is started, can it be saved and returned to in order to complete?
Yes, it can.
Payment for the consumption lounge fees can be made by cashier's check and or money order. What entity should they be made out to specifically?
please make those out to the state of Nevada.
Okay. Are you required to have a specific individualized agent card application for each application you are submitting for? For example, if I'm 51% owner on one application and 3% owner on another application, will I be required to submit an agent card application for 2 business entities, or will one agent card application and fingerprint set be valid for multiple applications?
That is a question that I would like to take, and we'll offer that answer up on the FAQs.
If a retail attached applicant is approved for a final license and opens a lounge, can the licensed lounge space be moved to another building on the same approved property?
Sorry, can you repeat that one again?
If a retail attached applicant is approved for a final license and opens a lounge, can the licensed lounge space be moved to another building on the same approved property?
As long as it meets the definition of adjacent or attached for us, we as the CCB would not have a problem with it, but I think you'd have to submit a change of location with us as well, just to ensure it. That is really going to be more up to the local jurisdictions rather than the CCB.
Are we allowed to sell or provide cannabis edibles, and do the products we provide have to come from Nevada?
Yes, you'll be able to, sorry, missed the question, but you will be able to sell edibles. And yes, all products must come from licensed cannabis sales facilities in the state of Nevada.
If we have a dispensary license, can we apply for an independent lounge license? We may not have an adequate adjacent property available.
Yes.
Does state residency impact social equity license eligibility?
It does not. There's a federal clause, the dormant commerce clause, that does not allow us to favor in-state as compared to out-of-state applicants.
Okay. This is kind of a long one. There's a scenario. So for social equity status, is the individual with the cannabis charge required to hold at least 51% equity interest? First, and for social equity status, can the 51% be split between different qualifying requirements? For example, the applicant's brother was charged with the qualifying cannabis offense, but has not lived in a DIA for 5 years, but the applicant has lived in a DIA for 5 years. Can you mix and match the requirements if the 51% is owned by both individuals? Or does one single individual need to meet both the cannabis conviction and the 5-year qualifying zone residency?
All members, all owners that made up the 51% of the social equity must meet all the requirements of the social equity applicant. So it could be, you could have split up between 5 or 6 different owners, but all 5 or 6 different owners must meet all the requirements of the social to be a social equity applicant.
Regarding social equity, can you define what is meant by 51% ownership? Profit? Question mark?
It just means ownership. They have to have 51% or greater ownership of the company or of the license. Excuse me.
So to be a little bit more detailed with that answer, if you have 4 individuals who are applying as social equity applicants, again, they have to meet all the requirements, but those 4 members of ownership have to meet 51% ownership.
Okay. We have a dispensary located in a shopping mall. We intend to open a lounge in a building located across the parking lot within the shopping mall that they share a common property/boundary line. There are no public right-of-ways within the shopping mall. Would that building qualify for a retail lounge license?
We recommend that you speak to an attorney on that. We're not going to answer like hypothetical questions. There could be a lot of different scenarios that I don't know of within that property line. So again, I would recommend you speak to an attorney.
Okay. How will the random number generator process be proven to be fair? Who is responsible for the drawing, and will it be transparent for the public?
It will be transparent. It will be fair. We have a company that's going to handle the random number generator and the computer, and we also have potentially an accounting firm that's going to view it as we do the random number generator selection and sign off that it was handled openly and fairly.
NCCR 5.040 and 5.045 refer to minimum scoring guidelines. Is there a minimum score needed to be placed into the random selection pool? And if so, where is there an explanation of those scoring guidelines and the weight associated with each guideline? If not, does the application need to simply provide the information contained in NCCR 5.401A through M?
Yes, it needs to include all the information between 5.0401A through M. That is the minimum scoring guideline is filling out the application, being able to fill the application accurately and correctly. If you're able to do that, then you meet the minimum scoring guidelines to be included in the random number generator.
The preparing to apply for a lounge license worksheet says that you must file articles of incorporation or other formation documents with the state. We want to use the same LLC our current cannabis licenses are under and register an FFN using the proposed lounge name. As FFNs are filed with the Clark County Clerk, not the Secretary of State, does a FFN filing meet the lounge application requirements as a business filed with the state?
As it's just a fictional name under the company that has been filed with the state, I would assume that is correct. But again, we're getting into hypothetical questions that we don't feel comfortable answering. So I would check with an attorney. But if it's been, the company has been filed with the Secretary of State, then that should be okay.
Okay. How are owners identified for publicly traded companies identified as shareholders how are owners identified for publicly traded companies identified as shareholders change frequently for the agent card and fingerprint requirement? What if the company has a 5.125 and 5.112 waiver?
That, we're going to have to post that answer also. That's going to take a little bit of explanation, and we'll post the answer to that question.
If I have less than a 5% stake in an applicant/application, is there a limit on how many independent applications I can be involved in? For example, could I be less than 5% equity holder in 15 companies that are submitting applications?
Yes, hypothetically, you could.
If I have less than a 5% stake in a retail attached consumption lounge, can I also have less than a 5% stake in an independent consumption lounge license?
Again, yes, you could, as long as it's less than 5%.
For applicants seeking a retail cannabis consumption lounge, will the CCB consider a management agreement arrangement that would allow the license holder to bring in a qualified operator to manage the consumption lounge? Can this be done during the suitability period? And can this be done during the conditional license period?
And again, I think that's a question that we would like to formulate an answer for and post on the website.
Okay. We still have a few questions left, but I just want to remind attendees that they can also ask questions live by clicking the raise hand icon in the Zoom app or pressing *9 if you're dialing in by phone. Will each adult use retail outlet be permitted to apply for a lounge license, or is each ownership group permitted one license?
Sorry, can you repeat one more time?
Will each adult use retail outlet be permitted to apply for a lounge license, or is each ownership group only permitted one license?
Yeah, each ownership group is only permitted one license.
Okay. If an applicable local government jurisdiction has not yet adopted consumption lounge regulations, but intends to allow them, will applicants be able to apply and move through the state approval process and be issued a conditional license until the local regs are adopted?
The simple answer is yes, they will. As long as the local jurisdiction is opting into allowing cannabis consumption lounges, you will be able to apply in that jurisdiction.
Okay, a lot of the questions that we're getting are in regards to the less than 5% ownership and regarding fingerprints and agent cards. So I'm just gonna go past those, and like everyone said, they'll be addressed in the FAQs.
Yeah, it's again, simple thing, less than 5%. You can be on multiple applications, but less than 5%, you still must apply for an agent card.
Okay. Are there certain products that the customer can purchase from the attached retail store for consumption lounge use?
Actually, at the consumption lounge itself, that's at a retail attached, you must purchase products from the consumption lounge.
Yeah, so are there certain products that the customer can purchase from the attached retail store to be used in the consumption lounge?
No, you're not going to be able to purchase things from the dispensary and then bring it into the lounge to use. You're not going to be able to do that.
Okay. Can an owner with social equity status have resided in another state for the last 5 years? Yes. As long as they fit those DIA criteria, then they could have resided in any state.
Correct.
Okay. This is a question regarding the live answers that we're giving. Will there be a recap of the Q&As on the CCB website? And yes, there will be. We've published some frequently asked questions on our site, and we're continuously updating that document. So we'll hopefully have the answers for the questions from today's webinar sometime next week. All right. Will all Nevada local jurisdictions be optional in the drop-down menu for the application, or only those that have not opted out?
Only those that have not opted out.
Do you have to pay the entire $100,000 for the consumption lounge license application, or is there a less amount that is submitted at the application?
No, that is
The full amount.
Yeah, you have to submit the full amount. That is the application processing fee.
So
And again, that is just for the retail attached consumption lounge license.
I have no previous licenses for cannabis or any previous experience dealing with cannabis, but I want to apply for just the lounge. Is that okay? Or do I have to be associated with a dispensary already?
No, that would be, you'd be applying for an independent cannabis consumption lounge license, and you do not need to be affiliated with the dispensary at the moment. However, again, if you are granted one of the licenses, you'll have to work with a dispensary to purchase the products for sale.
Okay, and then do we keep the application fee, and how much specifically if a applicant is not chosen to be put in the random number generator?
Yeah, that fee is non-refundable.
At what step in the process must retail lounge applicants submit information for the prospective license holder requirements, such as hours of operation and proof of liquid assets, et cetera?
That would be during the prospective license holder stage when we're doing the suitability check and reviewing the SOPs.
But I think all those need to be submitted within 120 days after the letter granting the prospective status goes out.
Yes.
Okay, and most of the questions that remain in the chat have to do with the 5% owner regarding agent cards and fingerprints, which, as you said, we've addressed and we will address again in the FAQs. I don't see any more questions. Oh, here we go. Other than the diversity plan, are there any documents that will be needed that you will need to upload into the application. And the answer to that is no. All you'll need to upload is the diversity plan, unless you're selected for a prospective license. Okay, and then a question we just got in is what is required to have ready at the application stage? We covered that in this webinar, and we also have a preparing to apply worksheet on our website. We've also linked it in the Q&A, so if you want to check that out. We also have a webinar on preparing to apply that's also on our website, so I would recommend reviewing that to see what you should have ready before you begin applying. All right, I don't see any more questions in the chat. I just want to give one last opportunity. If anybody wants to answer a live question, you can click the raise hand icon in Zoom or press *9. Okay, there's one. We have Richard Taylor.
Yeah, I'd like to know about advertising. Can we advertise on TV, radio, as a consumption lounge? And can an independent lounge sell cannabis products besides food? Can they sell any cannabis?
Steve, you want to handle the advertising?
Yeah, the advertising falls under the same advertising requirements that all other cannabis establishments must abide to. And yes, the independents can sell the products that are defined in the regulations that can be
SCCR 15, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I have another person that has their hand raised. Lisa Beth. Go ahead.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly, so that the independent lounge will be able to sell both flower and edible for consumption in the lounge.
Correct. As long as you follow all the requirements laid out in the NCCRs, and in particular NCCR 15.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right, I have again, how many consumption lounge licenses will be issued in this next round? And to specify, the $100,000 is a non-refundable fee, even if not chosen.
Yes, there's an application processing fees are non-refundable. Again, it's just $100,000 for the retail attached consumption lounges, and for independent consumption lounges, it's $10,000. And for the social equity independent consumption lounges, it's $2,500. And those are non-refundable processing fees.
Okay. Do you take into consideration attendance in these webinars and meetings when reviewing applications?
Though we say it's a great idea to attend these, no, we do not. We're not going to look at attendance these when we're doing suitability checks.
Okay. All right, and we have some of the same questions that we got earlier, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you, everybody, for attending today's webinar. And as a reminder, this video will be on the CCB website, and you can review it at any time. We'll also post the Q&A from this webinar on the CCB website next week. Some of these questions have already been answered via email or an earlier webinar. So be sure to check out our frequently asked questions page as well. And we're constantly updating that document. If we weren't able to get to your question, you can also email us at ccbconsumptionlounge@ccb.nv.gov. And also today we published a new video that will walk you through the application. It'll be similar to what we presented earlier, but you can see some more specifics about the application in that video. And I want to thank you all again for attending, and I want to thank our panelists for answering the questions. We hope you have a great day. Thanks for joining.